It wasn't until I was picked up and brought home that I realized the brother and sister who adopted me were actually canon fodder side characters in a novel. The sister, melancholic and aloof, fell for the warm and sunny male lead. The brother, insecure and starved for affection, willingly became a simp for the female lead. They thought they'd found salvation. Little did they know, the male and female leads were only using them as stepping stones. So, in order to keep enjoying my life as a rich heiress, 1-year-old me decided to save the crumbling situation and hold up the collapsing household. I would carry this family on my own. Hashtag chapter 1. The moment I lost consciousness after trying to save a drowning child, I made a wish. That in my next life, I'd be born into wealth. That I'd smell my mother's luxurious skincare products from the moment I opened my eyes. That I'd hear the hearty laughter of a rich dad and feel the warm hands of a chairman grandfather stroking my tiny head. But when I woke up, I was lying peacefully, in a trash can. TCH, wasn't good karma supposed to bring good rewards? Why the hell did I get this hellish start? The trash can lid was closed. I was nearly suffocated by the choking stench of all kinds of garbage mixing together. I looked at my little chubby hands soft like lotus roots and was silent for a long time. No choice. If I wanted to survive, I had to cry. I didn't know how long I screamed for, but finally, someone seemed to notice something strange in this rundown alley. I heard the sound of leather shoes scraping against the ground gradually getting closer. Who could understand the overwhelming sense of salvation I felt at that moment? As the lid opened and light flooded in, I locked eyes with a middle-aged man in a crisp suit and white gloves. A butler, it must be the family butler who came to get me. I knew it, I must have been kidnapped from a wealthy family. I reached out to him desperately. Please, take me back to that 1,000-square-meter villa with a swimming pool. Don't let my dear parents worry themselves sick. A few minutes later, I was inside a black luxury car. I locked eyes with 2 high schoolers from a noble academy in the back seat. The butler said awkwardly, "Young master, young miss, the slums aren't far from here. There are a few vocational schools nearby. This child might be an abandoned baby. Should we take her to the police station?" I burst into tears. That's it. I'm doomed. The 2 students with faces too flawless to belong to real humans nodded indifferently. The butler gave a relaxed smile. Well then, I'll trouble young master and young miss to look after her for a bit. I was handed to the young miss. She frowned, completely flustered as she awkwardly held me. I'm a sucker for good looks. Seeing her face up close, one that even top actresses couldn't compete with, I couldn't help but reach out and touch it. The young master smirked at her, and she rolled her eyes. Such a pain. You hold her, she said, shoving me into his arms. He froze just as stiffly as she had. Looking at the 2 of them with their matching god-tier looks, I couldn't help but giggle. The young master's lips twitched into a smile. But the moment he caught his sister's composed assessing gaze, he immediately curled his lip in disdain. She reeks of trash. So stinky. With that, he plopped me down on the seat between them. The car was spacious, plenty of room for the 3 of us. But just thinking about the miserable life awaiting me in an orphanage made me cry from the bottom of my heart. The young miss couldn't take the noise anymore. She picked me back up. I saw her face and I was happy again. I stopped crying. She put me down, I cried again. The young master picked me up, I laughed. He put me down, I cried. Suddenly, they were intrigued. Like a game of tag, they took turns picking me up and putting me down. Ha ha ha, wah wah, ha ha ha, wah wah. It went on for dozens of rounds until the butler's gentle voice came, "We've arrived at the police station." I immediately let out a scream so loud it nearly blew the roof off the car. The young master and miss exchanged glances. A few seconds later, they spoke in unison, "Let's keep her." Hashtag chapter 2. The butler was highly efficient and quickly completed the adoption procedures for me. That was how I learned the identities of the young master and young lady. The most prestigious family in City, the Wang family, a pair of dragon phoenix twins. And now, I had become their younger brother David. Don't be envious just yet. Because these 2 are the biggest cannon fodder in a childhood sweetheart turns power couple revenge fantasy novel. The siblings had everything, a powerful family background, outstanding looks, but they lacked one thing, a complete family. After giving birth to them, their parents divorced and quickly returned to their respective ex-lovers. In their eyes, the twins were nothing more than tools in a marriage of convenience. So for years, they were completely neglected. You can't expect kids who've never known love to grow up kind, innocent, and beautiful. In short, Alicia and George both ended up with twisted, eccentric personalities. Even though they were siblings by blood, they couldn't stand each other. And to make things worse, they crossed paths with the male and female leads, a pair of childhood sweethearts straight out of Villain Valley. The leads deliberately created chances to get close to the twins, scheming together to drive a wedge between them. The sister, melancholic and aloof, was drawn to the male lead's sunny warmth. The brother, insecure and love-starved, willingly became a simp for the female lead. Little did they know there was no redemption. They were nothing more than stepping stones for the leads on their road to success. After squeezing every last bit of value out of them, they were cruelly discarded. The unconventional morality of the main characters and the messy mix of genuine emotion and selfish gain made readers scream masterpiece and shout so satisfying. Satisfying? Well, I'm not feeling very satisfied right now. Even the carefully prepared imported formula from my nanny no longer tastes good. That's the thing with babies, just a little discomfort and the crying is unstoppable. Soon enough, Alicia and George came rushing over. The nanny held me, flustered. Young master is upset for some reason, nothing seems to calm him down. But the moment Alicia took me in her arms, I stopped crying. Everyone stared in disbelief. The nanny chuckled, "Miss, it seems young master is really attached to you." Her lips curled up for a second before she pressed them together again. With a cold snort, she said, "What a pain. If you keep fussing, I'll toss you back in the trash can." Speechless. I immediately reached out toward George. He looked a bit surprised, frowned, but still held out his hands. But Alicia, still holding me, turned and started walking away. She said, "He's sleepy. You can hold him next time." George gritted his teeth. He clearly wanted me. "Give him to me." Alicia replied, "You're clumsy. What if you drop him and kill him?" George was speechless. Listening to their bickering, I slowly closed my eyes and curled my little fists as drowsiness set in. My brother and sister are both kind and good. I absolutely won't allow the male and female leads to mess with them. ## Chapter 3. The only perk of being a baby is that I can be as willful as I want. If I don't see Alicia and George for a few hours, I cry. The nanny skillfully glanced at the clock and only after confirming it was noon, the time school ends, did she make the call. The line connected quickly. "How's David today?" Hearing George's voice, I babbled and reached for the phone, saying, "Little brother." George replied, "Call me big brother." I answered, "Little brother." There was silence from his end, and then Alicia took the phone. She instructed the nanny and the butler to take me for my second polio shot and first DTaP vaccine. She also asked how many milliliters of milk I drank each time, whether my bowel movements were normal, and reminded the nanny to keep doing baby massages for me. These days, she was like a mother, feeding me formula and reading me stories as soon as she got home. And George, in order to train my speaking ability, sat beside me every day to teach me how to talk. He would say, "Big brother." I'd reply, "Little brother." They had a clear division of labor. Even though they often argued over who got to hold me, the once empty villa was slowly starting to feel like a real home. Today, however, they didn't come home on time after school. The butler tried to coax me in a soft voice, "Your brother and sister went back to the old house for their birthday. They'll be back a bit later, okay?" In the original plot, the Wang parents were supposed to break tradition and actually come back to celebrate their children's birthday once. Though the twins claimed to be annoyed by it, deep down they were secretly looking forward to it. They waited a long time. When they finally called, they found their parents had already completely forgotten about it. No apology, no guilt, just casually transferred some money over. Were they short on money? No. What they lacked was love and care during their formative years. So to cling onto the tiny bit of warmth the male and female leads offered, they willingly flew into the fire like moths to a flame. Sure enough, when they returned, one looked gloomy and the other downcast. They didn't even stop by the nursery to see me, just went straight to their rooms. I sighed. Time to unleash my ultimate move. Wah! Soon, I heard a door slam. Alicia, eyes red, walked over to my crib to check on me. She frowned. "You didn't even poop. What are you crying for?" I didn't answer, just kept crying. Even when she picked me up, she couldn't calm me down. Left with no choice, Alicia went to call George out. He came out sulking, clearly already in a bad mood. Seeing me like this only made him more irritated. He tossed me into the cradle with a heavy hand roughly. He snapped, "Stupid little brother. Go to sleep." I reached out and started batting at the wind chime above my head, and while doing that, I tried my best to make sounds, hap-poo, hap-poo, hap-poo. The mix of baby babble and the clear chime of the bells, it actually sounded like a birthday song. They both froze. After a moment, Alicia raised her hand to cover her face and let out a laugh. George, infected by the mood, turned his head and scoffed, but the smile at the corner of his lips kept growing. I finally let out a breath of relief. Just as I was about to fall asleep, George turned on his phone's camera. He said, "Do it again. Otherwise, you'll grow up and go complaining on social media that we never recorded your childhood." I was speechless. Just admit you want to show off online. ## Chapter 4. Soon, Alicia and George were in their second year of high school. They had perfectly avoided all the original plot points where they were supposed to cross paths with the male and female leads. Just as I started to let my guard down, Alicia went missing. The butlers sent people to search for her for an entire day and night. The next day, she finally came back. But she was covered in scrapes and bruises, and supporting her was a boy who looked just as battered. He gave a polite smile, but when his eyes swept over the discreetly luxurious villa, a flicker of calculation flashed through them. "Not good, family fortune alert, danger ahead." After the family doctor finished treating her wounds, Alicia finally explained, she had gone hiking and accidentally ran into the male lead Makoto. The two of them fell down a steep slope, and their phones were broken in the process. Fortunately, neither of them was seriously injured. I was speechless. Like hell, I believe this had nothing to do with Makoto. After the incident, when Makoto came out and saw Alicia playing with me, he walked up, crouched down. When he saw me glaring at him, he smiled and patted my head. "So this is your little brother. Even at such a young age, he's got presence." Alicia was always in a great mood when someone praised me. Her cheeks flushed a light pink and she pressed her lips together shyly. She said, "Do you want to hold him?" "Sure. Don't you dare come closer." The moment he reached his hands out, I burst into loud wails and bared my baby teeth at him. Alicia's movements paused. She glanced at the now awkward Makoto. She said, "Sorry, my little brother is probably a bit shy around strangers." Makoto quickly adjusted his expression, putting on a gentle and proper smile. He even praised me for being alert and said I'd surely be able to protect my sister in the future. Upon hearing that, Alicia's expression softened even more. The way she looked at Makoto now held a tenderness she couldn't quite hide. And when Makoto got up to leave, she even looked a little reluctant to see him go. Of course he's the male lead, just a few words and he had Alicia falling for him. I closed my eyes, emotionally exhausted. George didn't come back until the evening. He kept glancing expectantly at his phone, the corners of his mouth curved up in a way he couldn't even suppress. Seeing his love-struck face set off all my internal alarms. Alicia noticed something was off too. She asked, "Where were you today?" George shot her a glare and said, "None of your business." Alicia narrowed her eyes. "Are you, in a puppy love phase?" George snapped impatiently, "And you think you're in any position to question me? We searched for you for a whole day and night, and in the end, you spent the night alone with some random guy. Sis, I don't want to say too much, but could you be a little more careful? It's fine since nothing happened, but what if something had? You'd regret it forever." Alicia had no comeback. George shook his head and went back to his room. I babbled and waved my arms. It's over. The moment the male and female leads show up, the sibling bond starts to fall apart. ## Chapter 5. At night, just as I was about to drift off, I heard someone quietly walking up to my bedside. A familiar soft fragrance tickled my nose. It was Alicia. She gently lifted my head and slipped something under my pillow. She said, "Be good, David. I didn't mean to make you all worry. Yesterday I ran into a street fortune teller. He said someone in our family had a fate destined for an early death. Of course, I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but since it had to do with you, I couldn't ignore it. So I followed his advice and went up the mountain to get a safety charm from a temple. If nothing else, it gives me some peace of mind." Alicia stared at me for a long while, as if even she found it funny. She said, "Sis probably got scammed, huh? But it's fine. Our David has to grow up safe and sound. So that's why she went up the mountain." I instantly burst into tears. I couldn't help it. Alicia quickly picked me up and gently rocked me. "Had a bad dream? It's okay, your sister's here." She softly hummed a lullaby, her voice warm and soothing. As my consciousness faded, I clenched my tiny fists and made a vow, I will protect them. But I was still too small. I couldn't do anything. Where I couldn't see, Alicia and George had started crossing paths with the male and female leads, and were growing closer. Makoto began visiting frequently, using concern for Alicia's injuries as an excuse. Then he started giving her rides home after evening classes, claiming it was dangerous for her to go alone. Since their last falling out, George hadn't walked home with Alicia again. Instead, I saw him a few times refusing the driver and biking Willow, the female lead, home himself. A handsome boy and a pretty girl, youthful and carefree, like something straight out of a teen romance drama. I rolled my eyes in silence. Soon, it was my first birthday. They threw me a birthday celebration. Alicia placed me on a blanket surrounded by various symbolic objects, an abacus, books, a rattle, a toy piano, a gourd, a wooden mallet. Under the excited, expectant gazes of everyone around, I unhesitatingly crawled toward a 100 yuan bill. Mumbling as I went, "Money, money, money, come to me." Alicia and George fell into a deep silence. They exchanged a look, then immediately started blaming each other like pros. Alicia said, "I told you to stop watching short videos in front of David." George snorted, "I was gonna say the same to you. You filmed them too." "David's smart, what if he picked up your bad habits instead?" By now, I could just barely speak coherently. I said, "Brother, sister, don't be mad, don't be mad." Alicia picked me up. She asked, "David, you really like this, huh?" Eyes sparkling, I replied, "I like money." She pressed her lips together, half amused, half helpless. "Well, as long as you're happy. We've got plenty of money in this house anyway." George suddenly thought of something. His face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Don't forget Dad's girlfriend is pregnant. She's going to fight us for the inheritance." Alicia looked at me, her gaze flickering. She said, "What belongs to us, no one can take away. Even if it's just for David's sake, we have to protect this home." For once, George actually agreed. He said, "First, we need to raise our grades. The heir of the Wang family can't be a loser." "Right. Let's hire some tutors." Fired up, I pumped my fists and shouted, "Tutors! Tutors!" The next day, Makoto and Willow showed up at our house. Then I looked at Alicia and George, one's ears were red. The other couldn't stop following someone with his eyes. I smacked my forehead hard. "Brother, sister, you've just let the wolves into the house." ## Chapter 6. At the end of the second year of high school, their school organized a field trip. Originally, Alicia and George looked down on these kinds of group activities. But now, thanks to Makoto and Willow, they both decided to join. Just before departure, I wouldn't stop crying. Something in my gut told me, the male and female leads are going to stir up trouble. I didn't want them to go. So, like a little troublemaker, I stood in front of them and wailed at full volume. The nanny quickly picked me up and tried to comfort me. "Your brother and sister will be back soon. Let's be good and wait for them at home, okay?" I replied, "No." George thought for a moment, then came up with a plan that pleased everyone. He decided to take me along. I was speechless. He said, "David is old enough now. He should get out and connect with nature a bit more." It sounded like a very proper reason, but I knew he had ulterior motives. Even Alicia didn't object. And so, we set off. We were the last to arrive. The moment I stepped off the bus, I became the most eye-catching baby in the crowd. In an instant, praises rained down from every direction. I returned a cocky little smile. The crowd screamed in delight. Seeing the satisfied, slightly smug curves at the corners of Alicia and George's mouths, I finally realized their true motive. Posting on social media wasn't enough anymore. Now they were showing me off in person. Before long, a few girls hesitantly approached. "George, can we hold your little brother?" Their expressions were sincere, but with a hint of cautiousness and unease. After all, Alicia and George came from an elite family and had aloof personalities, which made it hard for others to approach them. As a result, they had no close friends and had never experienced real friendship, making them especially vulnerable to the male and female leads' manipulations. I decided I needed to help them make some new friends. So I took the initiative to reach out to the pretty sister and said, "Sister, hug." Her eyes widened, her heart practically melting. George hesitated, but eventually nodded. He said, "Then I'll trouble you to take care of him for a bit." The girls were shocked in a good way. They probably never imagined George could be so easygoing. Soon, I blended right in with their class. They squealed, "Ah, he's so cute." A beautiful girl with bright stunning features came over and said, "Move aside, I want to play too." She patted my head and asked, "Hey little guy, tell me, am I pretty?" I looked at her sincerely and said, "Sister is very pretty." She smiled faintly, and even when she saw Alicia radiating displeasure, she didn't mind. In fact, she deliberately teased me. "Then who's prettier, me or your sister?" I answered without hesitation, "My sister is prettier." The whole class burst into laughter. She pouted and said, "Well, I guess you're not wrong." Hearing my answer, Alicia's usually cold icy face finally began to thaw. The mood became warm and lively. Until Willow walked toward me. She bent down and said, "Little brother, I haven't held you yet." In that instant, it felt like a venomous snake had locked onto me. I instinctively took 2 steps back and almost fell. Alicia quickly picked me up, patted my back, and gave Willow a sharp look. "You scared him." Willow awkwardly licked her lips and turned to leave. George, looking anxious, quickly followed after her. Makoto let out a sigh, gave Alicia a disappointed look, and walked away. He thought Alicia was jealous, deliberately making Willow look bad because she couldn't accept how close Makoto and Willow had gotten. Now he had the perfect excuse to use this incident to get even closer to Alicia. Alicia furrowed her brows, looking a little wronged. After handing me off to one of the girls for a moment, she chased after him too. The girl holding me watched them disappear, then clicked her tongue and said, "Little guy, looks like your sister and Makoto have a thing going on." I groaned and rubbed my forehead in frustration. Ugh. This is all my fault, I ruined everything. Chapter 7. To my surprise, the moment we got home, Alicia and George started fighting. Alicia, visibly upset, questioned angrily, "Why are you always picking fights with Makoto? What did he ever do to you?" George snapped back, "That jerk provoked me first. He knows I like Willow, but he still flirts with her right in front of me." Alicia frowned. "Makoto isn't like that. He and Willow grew up together, they're just friends." George let out a laugh, sharp and mocking. "And what about you? Weren't you jealous of Willow too? Always targeting her." The two of them hit a deadlock and walked away on bad terms. Unfortunately, I got caught in the crossfire. Alicia, face cold, fed me formula without a word. She said, "David, you're so rude. You smile at everyone, but you treat Makoto differently. He didn't even do anything to you. Who do you think I'm doing this for?" A toddler can't regulate emotions. I was so angry I turned around and showed her my butt. I said, "Jerk. Thug. Don't like." That's it. I'm not smiling at either of them anymore. From that day on, the three of us entered a cold war. Alicia and George came home later and later. And I gradually stopped depending on them. They found me annoying from the start, now they could finally have peace. At 14 months, I started walking on my own. At 16 months, I learned to eat by myself with a spoon. At 20 months, I could speak in full sentences and was getting fluent. Even though the nanny recorded videos and sent them to Alicia and George, some nights I could still feel them watching me and quietly sighing. Sometimes it was Alicia. She said, "David, you grew up so fast. I should be happy, but why does it feel so empty inside?" Sometimes it was George. He said, "You change every day. We can barely keep up with you. We missed so many of your firsts. What a shame." He said, "Big bro, no, little bro, growing up isn't so fun. Could you maybe slow down a little?" 3 stubborn people. But deep down, all craving the same thing, to hold each other close. Chapter 8. In the blink of an eye, Alicia and George were now in their final year of high school. On my 2nd birthday, both of them had to go out. It turned out Makoto's birthday was also today, and Alicia had left early to go see him. As for George, whatever excuse Willow used, she managed to call him out too. The two of them crouched guiltily in front of me and said, "David, the butler and nanny will stay with you, okay? We'll be back really soon." I smiled and said, "It's okay, go ahead. I'll wait for you to come back." I didn't want to mess things up again and make them argue. I didn't want to be scolded for being rude anymore. It's just a birthday. But once they really left, I couldn't help feeling disappointed. Seeing how understanding David was, Alicia didn't feel as relieved as she had imagined. Instead, it felt like her heart was being squeezed tight and breathless. All she could think about was, what's David doing now? Is he missing us? Is he crying in secret? Makoto had to call her several times before she finally snapped out of it. He looked at her, confused. "What's wrong? You seem distracted." Alicia smiled faintly. Sorry, I was thinking about things at home. Makoto immediately thought he understood. He smiled and said, Alicia, you don't need to bottle everything up. I've been through similar things. I understand you better than anyone. Alicia was puzzled. She thought, you've taken care of a child before? You understand what it's like to miss a baby? She looked at him in confusion, but Makoto mistook it as her beginning to open up. The flash of amusement in his eyes quickly faded, replaced by a sympathetic expression. He said, our parents gave us life, but didn't raise us. They never cared about our growth, only their own pleasure. And they always dumped their emotions onto us. People like that don't deserve to be parents. It's okay to resent them, you don't have to feel conflicted about it. Alicia was stunned. For a moment, her lashes quivered, then suddenly a realization hit her. You're right. I can't become that kind of parent. Makoto was completely confused. After explaining the real reason and apologizing, Alicia turned and ran off. She burst through the front door, panting only to see the house already decorated with colorful streamers and birthday banners. George and David were inflating balloons together. Seeing this scene, the empty ache in her chest from the entire morning was instantly replaced by joy. She slowly walked over, covered David's eyes, and asked, Guess who I am? David turned his head, eyes shining. Sis. She picked him up and looked at George. How come you came back? George smiled back. There's nothing more important than family, right? Yes. Nothing matters more than family. ## Chapter 9. Because of this, Makoto and Willow probably started to feel a sense of crisis. Their prey was slipping out of their control. So they began to panic a little. One day, when Makoto came over to tutor Alicia, I overheard them arguing. Makoto said, Alicia, you're an independent woman, you're meant to be a strong leading heroine. You have your own life. You can't pour all your energy into your little brother, right? Alicia took a deep breath and replied quietly, David is still very young. He needs someone around. You said it yourself, we can't be irresponsible guardians. A flicker of impatience crossed Makoto's face. He said, you have a nanny. Besides, he's not even your real brother. You just picked him up. Alicia stared at him in disbelief. She never thought those words would come from Makoto. She asked, Makoto, what are you saying? Makoto realized he had messed up. His face went a little pale. He said, Alicia, that's not what I meant. Alicia bit her lip and said, that's enough for today. You should go. Seeing that she clearly didn't want to continue the conversation, Makoto had no choice but to leave. As he stepped out, he saw me. His guilty expression instantly turned cold. He mouthed the word, bastard. I instinctively took a step back and stared blankly at his retreating figure. A long while later, I knocked on my sister's door. Her voice was choked. Come in. I looked up at the doorknob and sighed. I said, Sis, it's me. I can't come in, I can't reach the handle. She quickly opened the door and scooped me up. She said, weren't you tidying up your toys? What are you doing here with me? I said, because I felt you weren't happy. She chuckled softly. Oh, and how did you feel that? I seriously placed a hand over my chest. I said, it told me, because you're sad, I feel sad too. Alicia paused, then turned her head away, pretending to be exasperated. She said, you're way too young to be spouting such sweet talk. I took the opportunity to kiss her on the cheek. I said, soft and sweet, sis, you're just like a little cake. A little cake can't be unhappy, or it won't taste sweet anymore. Even the coldest woman can't help smiling when she hears praise like that. She said, sis is happy now. Thank you, David. I grinned and said, you're welcome. ## Chapter 10. Alicia had just gotten back to normal when George started acting off. He didn't come home until nearly midnight, dazed and disconnected, unwilling to talk to anyone. Late that night, I heard the low sound of someone crying. I tiptoed out and saw George sitting alone on the balcony, silently shedding tears. I walked over and lightly patted his back. He jumped, startled, and turned to look at me. I asked, little brother, did you have a nightmare? Don't be scared, I'm here. George was speechless. He blinked hard, wiped his face messily, and turned away, ignoring me. I leaned my head in and said, big bro, what do we do? The clouds are hiding the sun again. He froze, remembering how I once said his smile was as dazzling as the sun. He couldn't hold back a laugh and finally pulled me into a hug, saying, all right. Stop worrying. I'm fine. But I asked, then why are you sad? You told me real men don't cry easily. George frowned slightly and sighed deeply. He said, real men don't cry easily, unless they're truly heartbroken. George had kept it all bottled up for too long. Now, with me, a child who supposedly didn't understand anything, he actually wanted to vent. Turns out, George met Willow on the day Alicia went missing. He was out looking for Alicia when he stumbled upon a group of thugs bullying a girl. Without thinking, he rushed in and rescued her. That girl was Willow. He said, at first, it was her who made the first move. She said she was grateful I saved her and wanted to repay me. She started bringing me breakfast, gave me little handmade gifts. After spending time with her, I felt like she was really different. She understood how I felt, always listened so patiently and kindly. I really liked her. But then, she kept bringing up Makoto around me. Every time I had a conflict with him, she'd look at me with such disappointment. Even Alicia thought I was bullying him. But I swear to God, I've never laid a finger on him. I comforted him, bro, you didn't do anything wrong. It's them. George's eyes were blank. He said, today I confessed to her. She said yes. I was so happy. But then she suddenly said her mom was sick and needed a lot of money. She asked if I could lend her 100,000 yuan. I hesitated. Then she got mad and said I didn't love her. I do love her. So why did I hesitate? I was speechless. Willow really has no shame. At this point, I had every reason to believe Alicia's disappearance and George's hero saves the damsel moment were all part of their setup. What kind of coincidence is that? I couldn't worry about keeping up my baby persona anymore. I looked at him seriously and said, Sis once told me, sometimes you have to trust your gut. If something feels off, it usually means something's not right. George replied, but I like Willow. I said, liking someone should go both ways. If someone truly likes you, they won't think it's normal to spend your money. You taught me that. George froze. Back then, we were watching short videos together, and one love guru said, a man who spends money on you doesn't necessarily love you, but a man who refuses to spend money on you definitely doesn't. I was watching so attentively. And since I learned fast, George worried I'd grow up to be a simp, so he corrected me on the spot. He never expected to hear that lesson thrown back at him now. It was like a knot in his heart finally loosened. He smiled with relief and said, You're right, David. I've been foolish. From now on, I swear I'll be a real man, not a simp. I grinned and said, You're awesome, bro. We talked on the balcony for a long time. At some point, I dozed off in his arms. Much later, faint footsteps outside the door slowly faded into the distance. Chapter 11. One setback after another made Makoto and Willow increasingly unable to keep their composure. They decided it was time to push George into complete isolation. So Makoto deliberately lured George to an old disused equipment room. As always, he provoked him. Willow likes me. Your sister likes me too. George, you're just a complete failure. But George only laughed. He said, whatever. I don't care. So what if no one was on his side? His little brother would always have his back. George turned and walked away. Makoto's expression shifted, then he sneered coldly. We'll see about that. He gritted his teeth, slammed his head into a piece of metal equipment, bang. A dull thud echoed. A large bump immediately formed on his temple. When he returned to the classroom, his bruised and battered face drew instant attention. Someone asked, Makoto, what happened to you? Makoto cast a fearful glance at George. The room fell silent. Everyone's gazes shifted, tinged with suspicion. George, completely calm, smiled. You're not going to say I hit you, are you? Makoto acted as if he were holding back. When Alicia entered the classroom, he dabbed at the blood on the corner of his mouth and said, George, I know you're pursuing Willow. But I've said it so many times, she and I are just friends. I'd never steal your girlfriend. So why won't you let me go? Alicia froze in her tracks. After a pause, she walked toward Makoto. George pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to hide the flash of mockery in his eyes. But before Makoto could even smirk in triumph, slap. Alicia smacked him across the face. She said, What makes you think I wouldn't believe my own brother? Makoto looked stunned. Alicia, what was that for? Alicia scoffed softly, turned around, and walked to the equally stunned George. Looking up into his eyes, she said, You're right. There's nothing more important than family. George had always been the type who stood firm against confrontation, but when it came to actual care and concern, he never quite knew how to handle it. He scratched his head awkwardly and said, "Sis, I swear I didn't lay a finger on him." Alicia replied, "I'm not stupid. Of course I know." George nodded, then turned to Makoto. "Well, since you say I hit you, how about we check the security footage?" Panic flickered across Makoto's face, but he quickly recovered and tried to strike back. He said, "You knew there weren't any cameras there. That's why you dared to hit me, isn't it?" But George calmly replied, "Sorry to disappoint. The Wang family happens to be a shareholder of this school. As such, we have a responsibility to improve the campus facilities. I had surveillance installed and tested in that area just a few days ago." Makoto's face turned ghostly pale. He opened his mouth, about to argue, when a cheerful girl interrupted with a grin. "Oh, no need for all that trouble. I was there at the time, taking a break. Got a front row seat to the drama, and I recorded the whole thing." George turned toward her and realized it was the same girl who had held David during the field trip. She smiled and added, "Your little brother said I was pretty and kind, so I figured I'd do one good deed today. If you're grateful, why not invite me over to play with your brother sometime?" The whole class burst into laughter. Someone said, "Even without the cameras, I'd believe George. You can tell a lot about someone by how they treat kids. If he raised a sweet and polite little brother like David, how bad could Alicia and George really be?" Another chimed in, "Yeah, we've been in the same class for 3 years. We know what kind of person he is." Yet another classmate said, "When I was being bullied, George stood up for me. How could someone like him ever bully others?" As voices of support echoed through the room, Makoto and Willow finally panicked. The video exposed his entire setup to everyone. The looks they got were now filled with disgust and contempt. Makoto had no choice but to apologize. As for Willow, who had been waiting outside the door, she turned and left without a word, choosing to save herself. Chapter 12. The siblings returned home together for the first time in a while. Alicia told George what she had found out. George said in disbelief, "You're saying those thugs were hired by Willow? That she staged the whole scene just so I'd save her at the perfect moment?" Alicia nodded. She said, "When I fell down the mountain, it was because Makoto suddenly appeared at the corner and startled me. I tripped over a rock, and he fell with me. At the time, I just thought he was being clumsy because he cared. But looking back now, it was all premeditated." The whole scheme, George's face darkened. He finished her sentence, "Money." The two sat in silence in the car for a long time. Being deceived for so long, thinking the feelings were real, anyone would find it hard to accept. Alicia suddenly remembered something. David is kind to everyone except for Makoto and Willow. They say children's instincts are the sharpest. I should have known. I wronged him. George, I also misunderstood you. George paused, then smiled, free of resentment. He said, "Sis, it's not your fault. We were both fooled. What matters now is that we learn from this, protect David, protect the family fortune, and never let people with bad intentions exploit us again. As long as we trust each other, we're invincible." He held out his pinky. Alicia met his sincere gaze, smiled, and hooked her finger with his. George said, "Pinky, swear, no matter what happens, we'll always believe in each other." And at that moment, I smacked my lips in my sleep, rolled over and went right back to dreaming. The afternoon sun was warm and gentle. What a pleasant day. Chapter 13. The day of the college entrance exam finally arrived. I asked the butler to take me to wait outside the test center. I even brought 2 little flags with me, symbolizing a victorious start. As the bell rang, students began to trickle out. I sat on the butler's shoulders, waving my flags enthusiastically. Alicia and George, both striking and refined, naturally drew attention wherever they went. I quickly spotted them in the crowd. I shouted, "Brother, sister, I'm over here." They walked over smiling. They said, "Thanks to David cheering us on, the questions felt way easier. Looks like they did pretty well." I gave each of them a big hug. Brother and sister are the best. Their classmates noticed me too and gasped in surprise. A girl shouted, "Whoa, David's here too. Hey, little guy, I held you when you were a baby, remember?" Another girl said, "Hee hee, back then you said I was prettier than your sister." Alicia snapped back, "Get lost. Stop messing with kids." There were so many people, I started to get dizzy. Alicia picked me up, her gaze gentle. She said, "All right, time to head home." That stunningly beautiful girl from before clung to Alicia's arm and whined, "Sis Alicia, you have to bring your little brother to the graduation party." Alicia rolled her eyes. She said, "You know what, just have the party at our place." The girl replied, "Sure, sure. Just tell me when to come." One dared to suggest it, the other dared to agree. A few days later, all their classmates showed up. Except for Makoto and Willow. ## Chapter 14. I learned the whole story from the gossip around me. Turns out, ever since their attempt to frame George failed, Makoto and Willow had a falling out. Right before the college entrance exam, Willow somehow got her hand fractured by a group of thugs. She believed it was Makoto who orchestrated it. So she deliberately hid Makoto's ID and exam admission ticket. The two ended up in a violent fight and both landed in the hospital. And just like that, they missed the exam. They had tried to set up Alicia and George to turn against each other, only to end up facing karma themselves. A perfect case of those who dig a pit for others end up falling in themselves. I turned to look at Alicia. She was sharing childcare tips with her close girlfriends. The girls beside her were listening attentively and taking detailed notes. On the other side, George was laughing and chatting with a group of friends. They were discussing which country to go to for their graduation trip. How wonderful! Both my brother and sister now had like-minded friends and a family that treated them with genuine care. They would no longer be fooled by fake affection and sweet lies. "David, come join the group photo." Coming. Everyone gathered on the lawn outside. Alicia and George stood on either side of me, holding my hands. The butler helped us take a group photo. In the picture, the three of us were smiling, warm and radiant. ## bonus scene. Makoto and Willow tried to get in touch with Alicia and George, only to discover they'd been blocked. Frustrated, they came in person. But this time, they couldn't even get past the villa's iron gates. The entire summer went by without them seeing either of them once. Because I was about to start kindergarten. On the first day of school, everyone was required to bring a handmade craft and introduce themselves. Alicia and George were determined to make me the coolest kid in class. They worked around the clock gathering materials, sketching designs, and scrapping plan after plan. The two nearly got into another argument over it. To which I could only say, competing for show-off points is a bad habit.